All right, guys, looking at a 2008 Toyota Sienna that has a check engine light. Code readout is P0170, which means that the bank 1, sensor 1 oxygen sensor is reading too lean. Now what that means is that you're either getting too much air into that side or too little fuel. This video will help you to troubleshoot that, and we might find an unexpected cause to this, so stay tuned. So one of the interesting things that people often do when they find that their oxygen sensor is misreading is they run right out, buy the oxygen sensor and put that in. Now, if you are wondering about bank 1, sensor 1 on the Toyota Sienna, it's actually all the way on the back bank. That would be bank 1. Front of the engine is actually on that side of the engine bay. So bank 1 is actually back against the firewall. So you need to slide underneath and basically shimmy up to get to that oxygen sensor. It's up very high, kind of like this one on the front, only it's up there against the firewall. If you need help in actually changing that, I have another video on how to get there in the simplest fashion without any special tools other than the oxygen sensor removal tool. So as I previously mentioned, this is a check engine situation that says P0171, which is bank 1, sensor 1, too lean. Again, too much air or too little fuel. But interestingly, it's only in bank 1, which pretty much precludes us from having any leaks basically from this throttle body out, because if we had any air leaks out here, we would end up with both banks getting too lean. And realistically, all you're looking for are air leaks that are beyond the mass air flow sensor, which is right here off of the air box. You can clean that. I don't know whether that makes a difference, quite frankly. I did that in trying to troubleshoot this. It made no difference, which in hindsight makes sense, since again, I was only having a problem on one bank of the V6. So in order for us to have a problem on one bank, we have to basically have a vacuum leak that is only, or an air leak that is only affecting one side of the intake manifold, which is kind of strange on a V6. So in order to check these vacuum leaks, one of the things that you want to do is check all of the vacuum lines here. But again, remember, all of these vacuum lines that are in this engine right here are all going to affect both sides of the cylinders, not just the back side. I've seen some information that says to change the air filter. Again, not really going to make a difference in this one, since we're only reading lean on that back cylinder bank. So again, you can check the intake air hose. If this is cracked back here, which is behind the mass airflow sensor up there, you might end up getting the vacuum leak there, but again, that's still going to affect both banks. So what we have to do now is troubleshoot why we only have a lean situation on the back bank. So what I'm going to do is actually just pop the cover up off of the engine here, which literally just lifts out. We'll set that off to the side so we don't step on it. Now, here's our intake manifold. Here's a vacuum tube coming in. That one, if it was leaking, if we had an air leak there, we would get a sensor 2 running too lean, bank 2, sensor 1 running lean, because this one could be pulling in more air and it's not being metered by the mass airflow sensor over here. So that one could potentially affect one bank at a time. That would be only, again, bank 2. Our problem is on bank 1, sensor 1. So what we have to do is look for a vacuum line that could affect the back side of the intake manifold. And there is one, and it comes right here. It's this large line right there that if we trace it out, comes right here to the front valve cover. And that silver twist right there, that nut that's driven into the valve cover, that's called a PCV valve. So that would be the positive crankcase ventilation valve. So your PCV valve is threaded into the valve cover. This is actually what it looks like outside of the valve cover here. It basically is a breather element that we get some vacuum that comes through, pulled from here, and there is a small ball or valve in there. A lot of people will just test this by shaking it, and when they shake it, you'll hear a click. Probably can hear it there as I shake it next to the microphone. The problem with just shaking it is that you don't know whether when it closes it's fully closed. So you could still actually be having an air leak through this, especially if that thing is all gummed up. So some folks will advocate for cleaning it, so you can spray a little brake clean down through it, shake it out, make sure you cover both ends as you shake it because it's going to be spraying oil everywhere. If it's sticking at all where it's not making noise, you definitely need to replace it. But even if it's shaking and making noise, you might still have a vacuum leak here where it's pulling too much air. So what we would do is basically unclip that right there, slide the hose off, unbolt here, put the new one in, clip back up, and you're set. You've done a PCV valve change right there. Now, the amazing thing is that after hunting this down for several weeks, it turned out that this $10 valve was the cause for that P0171 code. Because if I pulled air through, in other words, if I sucked on the small nipple here, we're not going to say that on a video, but if you try to pull a little vacuum on this side, I was actually still getting air coming through, and that should actually seal solidly. I should be able to try to basically draw air through here, and we should get no air movement. Drawing air from this direction, we should get free flowing air. So what ended up happening is basically this thing was stuck slightly open. So at idle, when the vacuum is the highest in the engine, it was pulling an excessive amount of air in through this valve, and then that would cause too much air to get into just the back runners of that intake manifold, and the computer was unable to add enough fuel to counter that, so it ticks off the code. So now the interesting thing with that is, again, the computer is always going to be trying to correct this situation. So effectively, my fuel injectors were just dumping fuel onto that back bank and trying to make up for that excessive air coming in through that PCV valve. It got to a point where it could no longer add fuel to make any difference, and then the code got tripped. So this is kind of an interesting little design that Toyota has, so that literally this hose here, the small one off of the airbox, feeds only the second bank. This large hose, which comes from the PCV valve, only feeds the first bank. So if we have fuel mixture problems on front bank or back bank, there are a couple things that you can look at before you start going crazy and driving yourself nuts and spending a lot of money, because that PCV valve, this thing, $10. That was with tax at the Toyota dealership. So just run over, grab one. It was under $10. It wasn't even $10 with tax. So, and just replace that. It's actually a basic maintenance item. You should probably be replacing those much more frequently than any of us are. But again, that's a simple fix for a P0171 code. bank 1, sensor 1 to lean on a 2008 Toyota Sienna. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave some comments below. Let me know if this helped you out.